The most dangerous version of you is not the one who feels everything. It is the one who feels everything and is no longer destroyed by it. That is the version most empaths never become. Not because they lack the capacity, not because the sensitivity isn't there, or the depth isn't real, or the potential isn't extraordinary, but because they fall in love with their own pain before they ever learn to transcend it. They make a home out of their wounds and call it self-awareness. They collect evidence of how much they feel and call it identity. They mistake the ability to absorb the world for the ability to navigate it. And that mistake, sustained over years, over decades, over an entire lifetime of giving without boundary and feeling without sovereignty, becomes the invisible ceiling they never break through. You have spent your entire life feeling what other people cannot even name. You walked into rooms and knew before a single word was spoken who was hurting, who was performing, who was lying beneath their composure, who was desperate beneath their confidence. You absorbed emotional information the way others breathe air, automatically, constantly, without choice, without filter, without rest. And you called that your gift. It is, but in the form most empaths never move beyond. It is also a prison with extraordinarily beautiful walls. Because feeling everything without sovereignty over what you do with what you feel is not a superpower. It is a vulnerability so complete that the wrong people will find it from miles away. And they always have. The Sophia Stage changes everything, not by making you feel less, but by making you undeniable. This is where your sensitivity stops making you available and starts making you dangerous. The only question is whether you are ready. Most empaths believe their greatest strength is how much they can feel. It isn't. Their greatest strength is discernment, and most of them never develop it because they are too busy being consumed by the feeling itself to ever step back far enough to use it with precision. They live permanently inside the experience of their own sensitivity, mistaking immersion for mastery, mistaking depth of feeling for depth of understanding, mistaking the intensity of their emotional world for wisdom about how to move through the real one. And that confusion, sustained, unexamined, quietly catastrophic, is what keeps the most extraordinarily perceptive people on the planet chronically overwhelmed, chronically undervalued, and chronically available to exactly the wrong things. Here is the first brutal truth. Feeling everything is not the same as understanding everything. And most empaths confuse the two with a consistency that costs them decades. You feel the pain in a room and immediately move to absorb it, to fix it, to position your own emotional body between someone else's suffering and its full impact, as though your sensitivity arrived with a binding contract that made you personally responsible for every wound that crosses your path. You feel someone's loneliness and quietly make yourself the cure for it. You feel someone's anger and unconsciously make yourself the appropriate target for it. You feel someone's emptiness and pour yourself in, generously, devotedly, completely, until you look down and realize you are the one who is empty. And then you pour some more. Because stopping feels like failing, and failing feels like proof of the thing you have always most feared. That without your usefulness, you have nothing left to offer. That is not empathy operating at its highest level. That is empathy operating as a wound. Here is the second brutal truth. You have been using your empathy as a substitution for boundaries, and calling it compassion. It is not compassion. Real compassion, the kind that actually transforms people in situations rather than simply absorbing their damage, operates from fullness. It sees pain clearly, responds with genuine care, and maintains enough of itself in the process to still be standing when the response is complete. What most empaths practice is something categorically different. It is compulsive absorption, a reflexive, unexamined, deeply conditioned pattern of dissolving into other people's emotional states, and calling the dissolution love, of making other people's crises their emergencies, of treating another person's discomfort as a problem they are personally obligated to solve, regardless of the cost, regardless of the reciprocity, regardless of whether that person ever once asked them to carry it. And that pattern, compassionate on the surface, self-annihilating underneath, does not come from strength. It comes from a belief installed so early, so quietly, and so completely that it stopped feeling like a belief and started feeling like a fact, that your value is located in your usefulness, that you are most lovable when you are most needed. That the moment you stop absorbing, stop fixing, stop being the emotional infrastructure that holds everyone around you together, you will become unnecessary, replaceable, invisible in the way that terrifies you most. That belief is the cage, and your sensitivity, in its undeveloped, unsovereign, unexamined form, is what keeps the door locked from the inside. Here is the third brutal truth, the one most empaths will resist with everything they have, because accepting it requires them to re-examine relationships they have built their entire sense of self around. The people who have benefited most from our empathy, have not always been the people who deserved it. Some of them found you because your openness was visible from a distance, because people who need someone to absorb their chaos have an instinct for finding people whose boundaries are more suggestion than boundary. Some of them stayed because your compulsion to heal made you extraordinarily difficult to lose, because you kept showing up, kept trying, kept believing in a potential that they themselves had long since stopped investing in. Some of them called your sensitivity beautiful when it was serving them, and called you overwhelming, too intense, too much, the moment you expected the attunement to move in both directions. You did not attract them because something is wrong with you. Let that be completely clear. You attracted them because you had not yet developed the capacity that the Sophia Stage develops, the ability to feel someone's pain with complete clarity and respond not with automatic absorption, but with conscious choice. The ability to recognize in real time the difference between someone who is wounded and growing and someone who is wounded and feeding. The ability to offer your extraordinary gift with open hands while maintaining the interior sovereignty that ensures those hands can never be emptied against your will. That capacity is not coldness, it is not the closing of the heart that wounded empaths sometimes mistake for healing. It is precision, it is the full maturation of the gift you have always carried, from a wide, indiscriminate, beautiful, devastating openness into something focused, intentional, and completely yours. It is the difference between an empath who is moved by the world and one who moves it. The Sophia Stage is where that difference is made, and almost no empath gets there, because getting there requires them to grieve the identity they built around being endlessly, unconditionally, self-sacrificingly open. It requires them to look at the compassion they are most proud of and ask, with genuine honesty, how much of it was love, and how much of it was fear wearing love's face. That question is not comfortable, but it is the most important question your sensitivity has ever been asked to answer. And the answer, honest, undefended, finally clear, is the first step through the door. The Sophia Stage does not make you less sensitive. It makes your sensitivity surgical. Before this stage, your empathy was a wide net, cast indiscriminately, catching everything, holding it all, collapsing under the cumulative weight of what it collected. Every person's unspoken tension, every room's emotional undercurrent, every wound within proximity that your nervous system detected before your mind had even formed a conscious thought about it. You held all of it. You processed all of it. You made yourself responsible for all of it, until responsible became synonymous with depleted, and depleted became so familiar that you started to call it normal. After this stage, your empathy becomes a scalpel. You still feel everything, but you are no longer at the mercy of what you feel. You feel it completely precisely, without denial or suppression, and then you choose. You choose whether to engage or to witness, whether to offer or to withhold, whether this person's pain is yours to address or simply yours to acknowledge from a position of grounded, unshakable compassion that does not require you to sacrifice your own stability in order to express it. That space between feeling and responding, that sovereign, conscious, deliberate pause, is everything. It is the entire difference between an empath who is consumed by the world and one who changes it. The Sophia Stage ends the confusion between feeling and responsibility. You spent years believing that, because you could feel someone's pain, you were obligated to fix it. That equation gets dismantled permanently. Your sensitivity is information, not an assignment, not a moral debt. Extraordinary information that you now direct with wisdom rather than react to with compulsion. It ends the war with your own nature. Most empaths exhaust themselves wishing they felt less. They treat their sensitivity as a burden rather than a capacity waiting to be mastered. The Sophia stage ends that war completely, not because the feeling diminishes, but because you finally develop the interior architecture to hold what you feel without being dismantled by it. You were never built wrong. You were built for something most people cannot access, and you were simply never shown how to stand inside your own fire without burning. Here is the transformation that separates the empaths who reach the Sophia stage from the ones who spend their entire lives circling it without ever entering. It is not a technique. It is not a boundary-setting script or a morning routine or a new vocabulary for saying no. It is not something you can learn from the outside and apply to the inside. It is a fundamental, irreversible identity level shift in what you believe your sensitivity is for. And it is the shift that most empaths, even the ones who have done years of genuine, sincere, costly inner work, ultimately refuse. Not because they are weak, because it asks them to surrender the thing they have most confused with their own soul. Most empaths, at the deepest level of their self-concept, believe their empathy exists to serve others. That is the organizing principle around which their entire identity is constructed. They are the one who understands, when no one else does. The one who stays when every row Nels leaves, the one who sees the buried humanity in people that the rest of the world has written off and loves it back into visibility through sheer force of devotion. That belief feels sacred. It feels like the most noble and meaningful thing about them. And in many ways, it is real. It is genuinely beautiful. But it is also, when it becomes the totality of their identity, the most sophisticated trap an empath can build for themselves. Because when your entire sense of self is organized around being needed, when your worth is located, not in who you are but in what you provide, not in your presence but in your function, you do not actually have relationships. You have arrangements. You have positioned yourself as essential infrastructure in other people's lives, and you have called the dependency that follows intimacy. You have made yourself so available, so reliably present, so emotionally indispensable, that people stopped choosing you and started simply using you. Not always maliciously, sometimes just because you made it so effortless to do so. And somewhere in the middle of all that giving, you lost the thread back to yourself. Here is the truth. The Sophia stage forces you to face with absolute clarity. You are not staying in dynamics that drain you because you are compassionate. Compassion does not require self-destruction as proof of its sincerity. You are staying because leaving forces you to confront the question you are most terrified to answer: who am I when I am not needed? That question is the threshold. Everything the Sophia stage offers exists on the other side of it. Because the refusal, the thing that keeps empaths circling this stage without entering, looks exactly like virtue from the outside. It looks like loyalty. It looks like depth of commitment. It looks like the kind of rare, devoted, unconditional love that the world desperately needs more of. But from the inside, if you are honest, and the Sophia stage demands that you finally are, it feels like fear. It feels like the particular low-grade, chronic terror of discovering that without the role of healer, without the identity of the one who holds everything together, without the constant motion of giving and fixing and absorbing, there might be a silence. And inside that silence, a question. And inside that question, an answer you are not yet sure you can bear. The refusal looks like continuing to define your worth through other people's need for you. It looks like feeling quietly relieved when someone is in crisis. Because crisis means you are necessary, and necessary feels safer than simply being chosen. It looks like mistaking emotional enmeshment for depth, and calling the exhaustion that follows evidence of how fully you love. It looks like knowing, wait, it's the complete, unambiguous clarity of your extraordinary perception that something is taking more than it gives, and staying anyway, and finding increasingly sophisticated reasons why staying is the compassionate choice, rather than the fearful one. You know the difference. Your sensitivity has always known the difference. You simply have not yet given yourself permission to act on what you know. The Sophia stage gives you that permission, permanently, irrevocably. It does not ask you to close. It asks you to become selective, which is not the same thing, though the ego that built itself around unconditional openness will insist that it is. Selectivity is not coldness. It is not the armored, contracted, I will feel nothing withdrawal that wounded empaths sometimes mistake for healing. It is the full, mature, sovereign expression of a gift that has finally come into its own power. It is empathy with a spine, compassion with discernment, love that gives completely and knows precisely where and to whom and how much. Your empathy at full power, rooted in your own wholeness, directed with conscious intention, no longer hemorrhaging in every direction available, is one of the most transformative forces a human being can carry. It can move through pretense like light through glass. It can reach the places in people that logic and persuasion and reason cannot find. It can create the quality of connection that does not just comfort people, it fundamentally alters them. But only when it is whole, only when it is yours first. The empath who reaches the Sophia stage does not love less. They love with a precision and a power and a groundedness that the pre-Sophia version of themselves could not have sustained. They do not beg to be valued. They do not contort themselves into shapes that make others comfortable. They do not shrink their perception to protect someone else's ego or expand their availability to fill spaces that were never theirs to fill. They exist, fully, powerfully, completely, and the right people feel it without being told. That is the dangerous empath, whole, sovereign, unmovable in their own foundation, while remaining exquisitely, extraordinarily open to what is real. You are not far from that. You are one honest answer away from it. The answer to the question you have been avoiding. Who are you? When you are no longer defined by what you carry for everyone else. Find out. Because that person, the one waiting in the silence on the other side of that question, is the most powerful version of you that has ever existed. And they have been waiting, with extraordinary patience, for you to finally come home. Stop performing your sensitivity. Start owning it. Today, one decision. Identify the dynamic that has been draining you longest, the one you keep explaining away, keep finding reasons to stay inside, keep choosing at the expense of yourself. Look at it with the full force of the perception you were born with. Tell the truth about what you see, then choose yourself. Not as punishment to them, as loyalty to you. The world does not need more empaths who feel everything and survive nothing. It needs you, whole, sovereign, and finally, completely undeniable. Stop being available to everything. Start being devoted to what's real.